Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Raming Raconteur, and I hope you're getting ready to a great start to the new year in 2021. I finished reading Cosmicomics by Italo Calvino. I'm not exactly over the moon for it. I've really enjoyed the other works by Calvino I've read. Invisible Cities is one of my favorite books. I love getting lost in those cities with Marco Polo and Kublai Khan. I really enjoy The Non-Existent Knight. I find it a fascinating exploration of the Middle Ages, of knighthood, romance, chivalry, duty. I think it's a really fascinating, short novella. And these just don't quite work. In the same way that Calvino, always takes his sort of surreal, slightly absurd view, sometimes cynical, but in those other works, a very humane view of, humanity in the world. He explores abstract physics, astronomy, biology, semiotics in a couple of stories, and they just don't quite work. I don't think they often sometimes get lost and lose their humanity. As he's focusing on these stars, it's sort of that he's taking his telescope and fixing on a star initially, and then the telescope just starts swiveling around, and then it's like, oh, find that star again. And we as the reader can't necessarily do that. And so this kind of gives an example of what I'm talking about. I look around, and who am I looking for? She is still the one I seek. I've been in love for 500 million years. Okay? And if I see a Dutch girl on the sand with a beach boy wearing a gold chain around his neck and showing her the swarm of bees to frighten her, there she is. I recognize her from her inimitable way of raising one shoulder until it almost touches her cheek. I'm almost sure, or rather, I'd say absolutely sure, if it weren't for a certain resemblance that I also find in the daughter of the keeper of the observatory, and in the photograph of the actress made up as Cleopatra, or perhaps in Cleopatra as she really was in person, for what part of the true Cleopatra they say every representation of Cleopatra contains, or in the queen bee flying at the head of the swarm with that forward impetuousness, or in the paper woman cut out and pasted on the plastic windshield of the little ice cream wagon, wearing a bathing suit like the Dutch girl on the beach now listening over a little transistor radio to the voice of a woman singing, the same voice that the encyclopedia truck driver hears over his radio, and the same one I'm now sure I've heard for 5 million years. It is surely she I hear singing, and whose image I look for all around, and I am lost. Who is she? What the heck was that? It's a moonshot that misses the moon. But in the same story, here's how it closes out. And at the bottom of each of those eyes I lived, or rather another me lived, one of the images of me, and it encountered the image of her, the most faithful image of her, and that beyond which opens, past the semi-liquid sphere of the irises, in the darkness of the pupils, the mirrored hall of the retinas, in our true element which extends without shores, without boundaries. And that's beautiful. We have like one image, one sustained image and metaphor involving the eye. It carries through, and then it just has this beautiful poetic ending, and it's marvelous. And so that's just very much the mixed bag that we get in Cosmicomics. A number of the stories work really well, particularly those that have a sense of like humanity and connection in them. Distance of the Moon, the title story. The Aquatic Uncle, which deals with creatures like amphibians, reptiles, and fish, and like different, familial relationships between the characters. The dinosaurs works to a certain degree. And so there are stories that have a sense of humanity. Those ones I mentioned I really enjoyed, but a lot of the others just felt like he was trying to advance this concept in physics or biology. And I've taught both of those. I have a grounding in order to understand some of the references he's making. I just didn't feel they worked. But I do want to close out with one other paragraph that I thought did work and kind of pointed to some interesting ideas. I made the second circuit, the third. I was there. I let out a yell at a point which had to be that very point. In the place of my sign, there was a shapeless scratch, a bruised, chipped abrasion of space. I had lost everything, the sign, the point, the thing that caused me, being the one who had made the sign at that point, to be me. Space without a sign was once again a chasm, the void, without beginning or end, nauseating, in which everything, including me, was lost. And don't come telling me that to fix a point, my sign and the erasure of my sign amounted to the same thing. The erasure was the negation of the sign, and therefore didn't serve to distinguish one point from the preceding and successive points. And now there's a lot of points there. But it does, there's an energy to that passage that was lacking in that first one I read. And that's just kind of what I found throughout Cosmicomics. It was very, very much there were peaks and there were valleys. But like I said, it doesn't turn me off from Calvino. I still am going to reread Invisible Cities. I'm still open to reading and rereading other works by Calvino. At some point, I'll try to get into T0, which is kind of the companion set of stories to Cosmicomics. But I'm much more likely to be pulling this off the shelf. There are a sense in which some of Calvino's stories in this collection in particular reminded me of some of the weird ways in which Jorge Luis Borges tries to explore, similar ideas around what we know, how we know these things. The Aleph, Tlan, Ukbar, I forget the third city in there. Some of those stories come to mind. Even the Library of Babel, perhaps. However, there were moments that felt like way too close to this boy Aristotle. Not a fan. Another writer who sort of goes in some really weird, strange directions, and who I'm not familiar with, but I'm hoping to get to in 2021, is Luigi Pirandello. And there's certain aspects of Calvino that remind me a little bit of this tome by Umberto Eco Foucault's Pendulum. And I will say, as strange and weird and deep and esoteric as this book was, I found it a more enjoyable read than Cosmicomics. And I again felt that many of the strongest parts of Foucault's Pendulum were the human aspects, the connections, the relationships between the characters. And so that's, those are my thoughts on Cosmicomics. So I hope you have a great evening. Let me know if you've read this, if you've read other works by Calvino that you really enjoy, other writers that kind of push your mind in some of those more avant-garde ways. And hope to hear from you. Thanks.